This is Dave Hoffman.
A sophisticated sedan, a sports car, Nissan Maxima.
This is Dave Hoffman.
Adolf Hitler was known for his opulence. A declassified U.S. military file from 1943 reports that at the height of the war, Hitler had a special plane bringing him asparagus and bonbons fresh daily from Paris.
And this is Dave Hoffman.
Better Call Saul. A new episode premieres Monday night at 9, only on AMC.
If you need e-learning, we're just an email away. Corporate narration, tell us what to say. Explainer video, imaging radio, slinging local cars, reading IVR. No, we ain't no stars. This is the Middle Class VO podcast. The Middle Class VO podcast. The Middle Class VO podcast.
Welcome to the Middle Class VO podcast today, and today I've been looking forward to having this guest on for a long time. I have known of Dave Hoffman for a long time. My man crush on Dave goes way back to the early 2000s, actually, when I first started hearing him and recognizing him. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Middle Class VO podcast, Dave Hoffman. Dave, how are you?
Doing well, Kevin, Bobby. Thank you guys for having me. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about me.
You know what, Kevin? You have too many man crushes.
No, I've got a lot of man crushes in this industry. And the thing is Dave is across town. Dave, you're in Green Hills?
Actually, Greenbrier.
Greenbrier.
Which is, I think they adopted the name so that it kind of had that Green Hills ring to it.
Yeah, so we're not too far from each other. I'm over in Goodlettsville on the other side of 65.
Yeah, so we're both north of town.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of northwest. You're kind of northeast or due north.
Exactly. Yeah,
I'm going to be in Green
So
Hills this weekend. Wow.
Right? See?
Yeah, it's a whole Nashville vibe going on.
Exactly, man.
Bobby's in Cincinnati, Dave, just so you know. And this is the Middle Class VO podcast, Dave. And Bobby and I both come from radio. And I've been doing this about 16 years now, voiceover full time. And Bobby's been doing it, 5-6 years now, Bobby?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Full time.
And we both come from radio. And Dave, let's talk a little bit about your history. I know you've been doing this a long time. I know the whole story about your dad. Your dad was a legendary radio guy, and then he got into voiceover himself. And then he taught the craft to you. Is that right?
Yep, that's it. I mean, we can close in prayer. That's the whole story right there. But no, yeah, my dad was a radio guy in the big wonderful days of radio when the big promotions and the DJs were local celebrities. And he ended up in Nashville. They moved a lot, I think 23 times before they settled here. And I was the only one of 5 kids born here, the youngest of 5. Born here in Nashville. He was one of the good guys on WKDA. It was a big thing. And he used his kids in his bits. And then he really wanted to get out of radio and wanted to get in the music business and started running publishing companies and was a pretty good songwriter and music producer, but he always did voiceover, and that's really what paid the bills. And I always loved that. I hated the idea of the music industry. I could see that thing ebb and flow, and I always just thought, man, if I could just do what the old man does with the commercials, when I was a little kid. And yeah, he got me going, probably 5 years old. I think when I was 6, I earned more money doing voiceover than my parents did all together, that year. But,
you're kidding.
What was your first commercial?
Yeah, no, that's right. I probably can't remember the first, but I know that year I had there was a regional bank called Commerce Union Bank in the Southeast, and it was, I think, headquartered out in Nashville. I know their ad agency was here, and so I had the whole campaign when they introduced the ATM, which that should tell you about how old I am. But so I was on camera thing, and I brought the wagon up to the machine, and they piled the cash into it, and then we did a shoot at Cheekwood. You know that, Cheekwood, that beautiful. So we had this big room, and this was the playhouse that my dad was able to borrow money from the bank to build me this practice room for my violin kind of thing. So, but yeah, they had billboards. It was a big campaign. So that and some Opryland stuff and Sunbeam Bread and a host of things when I was a little kid. So
That's amazing.
Have you been working out of Nashville your whole career then?
No, not at all. In fact, the last thing I really did here, I had an agent. So if the Nashville people will remember Betty and Gene Clark, Spotland, and Talent and Model Land. That was my agent. And the last thing I did here, they booked me for Coal Miner's Daughter.
Wow.
So you remember the movie with Tommy Lee Jones and Loretta Lynn. Sissy Spacek about Loretta Lynn, right? And Sissy Spacek became Loretta Lynn, so that's why I say Tommy Lee Jones and Loretta Lynn. But, anyway, so that was the last thing I booked, and I kind of hit that awkward stage and no more bookings on camera, did some radio commercials. But then I grew up and got another career, got married pretty young here, and in 91 moved out west. And so it wasn't until I moved out west that I thought, man, I got to earn some more money, and tried to get a voiceover Zimmer put together. And back then it wasn't easy to do that. You know, I was searching through the Yellow Pages and found this thing called Las Vegas Jingles. And it was owned by a guy named Mickey Lekic, a Serbian guy. And it's a funny story. I don't know how much time. I don't want to,
we got plenty of time
for it.
Yeah, but bottom line, the guy said, come over, and we put together a demo, and it got actually out to Studio Center. You know those people, right?
Yeah.
They had opened an office in Vegas, and those guys signed me on the spot, and I worked. I think I worked before I was signed with them, and I just started working. And by probably the year 2099, I was earning a pretty good living doing voiceover. I was able to quit the other job that I had, which was in the commercial explosives business. So, and I was always worried. I had a bunch of kids, and I'm thinking, I'm going to get blown up here one day. I'm sure of it. So I was very thankful to get out of that business and into voiceover. So
you went from one volatile career to another one.
Exactly. Yeah, the paycheck's a little more steady in the explosives business, I'll tell you that much.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Your career, goes so far back. You never did the radio route at all. Tell us about some of the ups and downs that you've seen throughout your career, Dave.
Yeah, I always say to people when they ask about voiceover, and of course, as you guys know, everybody wants to do it.
Yeah.
And I love to coach. I've always done that, but I do it in a very bohemian kind of a way. Historically, I'll help one person a year, just out of the goodness of my dumb old heart. I did that for a long time, and I kind of had to stop doing that, so I monetized that. But I would just tell people that it ebbs and flows, man. The business ebbs and flows. It's if you think about it, you've got people that have long-time careers on screen that do a lot of great work, and you recognize them, and then you hear the stories in their biographies that they're out of work for a long time, that nobody's hiring them, right? How much more for a non-recognizable, just run-of-the-mill union voice talent, right?
Yeah.
And so it really ebbs and flows. How do you manage that, man? Golly, I was hoping you guys could tell me, right?
Whatever.
You got the wisdom pool here, but it still is that way. And I could talk about the ebbs and flows of voiceover for a long time, but I think it's like anything you do, you commit yourself to it, and you just try your best to learn. We strap on. We've not had real good systems in place. I've earned a lot of money and no money, and it's just riding those waves. And I tell you what, if you're getting into it, you should have somebody that really understands it well, and a tax person that gets what you're doing. And
Did COVID affect you very much, Dave?
It did, because I had a fair amount of live venue work, some NASCAR, Speedway stuff, and all that stuff went away. Any live event, anything that you do that you're promoting that's a live event, you don't have that anymore. Sporting events, that stuff really was drastically altered, and we're still kind of suffering from that. So that work is, and for a while, as you may know, and probably, Kevin, you maybe you didn't feel it as much, but automotive initially was affected.
Both of us, yeah.
Yeah.
People weren't selling cars. They weren't going and buying cars or whatever for a minute. And so I had a fair amount of automotive that I was doing that just kind of dried up. So yeah, it did. It definitely impacted, but not so much now. I think I'm as busy as ever now. How about you guys?
Oh, it's a crazy busy year. Yeah.
Yeah, thankfully all of that has picked back up. And there was a little bit of a dip in the automotive world when, because, one thing was because manufacturers weren't able to make cars. Mm-hmm. So that was part of that. But let me give some of your credits, by the way. You were the national voice of Nissan. And that in your narration is how I found you. You had narrated something. I think it was one of the biography series. And, I'm always, I'll pause and I want to check out who the narrator is when I'm like, oh gosh, I love how this guy sounds. And, I try to learn, it's like I'll research and then Dave Hoffman. And then it wasn't until like 2 years ago that I found out you were here. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And so tell me about, you were the national voice of Nissan for how long? Who did you get that gig through? Was it agent management? And how long did that last?
Yeah, so Nissan came to me. It was a huge cattle call. I know, at least for LA talent, maybe both coasts, but every major agency had, it was one of those things where don't tell anybody. We're getting, we're doing the voice of, and this is going to be a long-term gig. It's a big deal, and so I almost didn't audition for it. I saved my original audition. I've got it somewhere. It's buried now, but I was in a hurry to get somewhere. I'm like, and they wanted like 7 scripts, and had all this direct. You know how those are, right? All this direction, because they were actually hiring an image voice, which they typically have a celebrity for. While I had the account, Robert Downey Jr. and I would tag his spot. So I want to get into that in a minute. It's kind of cool, actually. But anyway, I had it for 3 calendar years, from March to March, 3 solid years. But it was so it was. I almost didn't do the audition. Did it, and it came down to 2 guys, and then they wanted to direct it ISDN session, like a callback, and went in and read, and man, we hit it off. And dude, it was just a screaming thing for 3 years. I've got pictures of my Telos Zephyr with like 6 hours on it. Wow. And so it was really, really good, and I was so thankful for it. Got it through my agent, SBV, at the time in LA. Mm-hmm. And then I worked with Chiat Day and with Zimmerman, because it was such a huge account, they had to have 2 agencies. So they had the image side was done by Chiat Day, and then the offers and events were done by Zimmerman. And so the offers and events, you get it's the tier 3 stuff.
Yeah.
And then the image stuff is super cool. So I really, really loved that. And then they told me halfway through the account that, hey, we've been negotiating for a celebrity voice. We had one before you came, and you've just been enjoying this for this, but it's gonna go to somebody else. Just get ready. Well, they got Robert Downey Jr., and I think he negotiated millions of dollars. I think $8 million plus some Leafs plus some GTRs or whatever, and just and only committing to, I think it was 4 sessions a year or something. Wow. I'm probably not supposed to be saying this, and they were like 2-hour sessions, or less, but. And good on him, right? But
yeah.
But anyway, my work increased because they kept having me tag his stuff, right? He would do the image stuff, and then I would get to come in behind and do the offer on the image spots. So it was a great account, but it ruined me, honestly, because I let so much stuff go. And there's a word to the wise. You get that big union job that's going to make all the difference, and it really can. But man, I let everything go. Everything. And I had auto accounts that I'd had for years, big, the biggest dealership in America for, I won't say the brand, but, and I let all that stuff go because I'm like, man, this is never going to end. Just classic foolish thing to do. Wow. And it was a hard hit. Anyway, wow. I'm talking a lot.
Wow. Well, let me pick that apart a little bit more, because you said you lost all those automotive accounts, and that's what will happen when you pick up a national account like that. You've got to drop all the local stuff and all the competing brands, right? And then after that campaign of 3 years was over, then did you kind of go back to your previous accounts and say, hey, I'm off Nissan National, I can start doing stuff for you again?
Man, I didn't, because I guess I'm a who moved my cheese guy. I'm like, well, the people that book me they'll kind of maybe make those calls, and they just didn't. I mean, we just suffered for a long time. We always talk about it and say that's the best and worst thing that ever happened to us. My wife and I, we talk about that. It's overall so good. You learned so much more, and had money kept being poured into our program like it was, like I wouldn't trade what we've learned in the years since then for $10 million in the bank, is what I say all the time, because you just learn invaluable lessons. You think wrongly about this business, and so you got to walk through something like that.
That's Scab-worthy.
I love that you have that grounded thought. That's really cool. Some of a lot of our podcast listeners are in the middle of their careers and looking for their first agents. And I noticed that you are represented by SBV and Abrams and Dean Pinero?
No, so I don't know why. By the way, love SBV. I was with him for, I think, 18 years. And Matt Wise was one of the agents there and left. And somehow or another, I found out about that, had a conversation with Matt, and Matt had done some really nice things for me, and I just connected with him, and learned about Dean Pinero and really fell in love with kind of the way they're doing things. And I hated to leave. I wasn't upset with SBV. They're total pros. They're fantastic. And I'm not just, you never say anything bad, but there's nothing bad to say. I love those people. I love those ladies. They're like family to me. But it just seemed right. So I recently switched over to Dean Pinero.
Okay.
So, and I'm, really happy there. Amazing guy. And Matt, I love so much, Matt Wise.
Yeah, I was wondering if you did have all three. It's like, how does that work?
No.
There's no way.
Yeah. No, and I think you're probably seeing, I made the adjustments on IMDb, but IMDb kept SBV on there. I don't know why that's the case. Maybe they have to straighten that out, but I tried to get it off there, but it does still show up like that.
We're talking with voice actor Dave Hoffman. By the way, it's Dave Hoffman with one N. There is actually, I'm sure, Dave, you're aware of this, but there's another Dave Hoffman with two N's at the end of his name. But we're talking with one N, Dave. The original Dave Hoffman is what I'm going to say.
Thank you for saying the original Dave Hoffman in Colorado, brother. No offense, but thank you for saying that, Kevin. I actually met with that Dave Hoffman one time. He came out to L.A. years ago, and a friend of mine, Chad Brannon, and I took him to lunch in the Grove and just sat down. He was kind of just, picking our brain about the business, and great talent. I mean, he's got a tremendous customer base, client base. Every now and then one will reach out to me, and of course I try to take the job and say, yeah, I'm that guy. No, I don't do that. I shuffle him back to him, and the same thing happens sometimes. But yeah, he's a lovely guy. He's a very talented guy. He's a radio imaging guy. Does some e-learning stuff, and I think he's expanded. He's probably got some promo stuff that he's doing now. I haven't looked in a while, but yeah. Anyway, there's a plug for the other Dave Hoffman.
Yeah. So we're talking with one N, Dave Hoffman. And Dave, if you're okay with it, we do a feature called the Cold Read Challenge, and we'd love to get you to do that here in just a couple of minutes, if you don't mind. Are you up for something like that?
Sure thing, yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah, you bet.
All right. And also, right now, though, we also do something else where we play a little game called Identify the Audio. And we did a little bit of a deep dive here, Dave, and I'm going to play something for you and it's 30 seconds. And so if you'll just indulge us for 30 seconds, and I'm going to see if you can identify this.
I don't think you know what you're doing. You need a parachute. That's a backpack.
Oh, all right. Kazooie? Oh.
Banjo and Kazooie have disconnected, now working individually and as a team to tackle their biggest adventure yet. Banjo-Tooie, rated E for everyone. Just remember, bears still need a bird to fly.
Dave, do you recognize that?
That is a deep dive. Yes, I do recognize that. What was that weird Gen X announcer at the end of that thing, though?
Yeah, right?
Good night.
What is that from, the late 90s?
Yeah, that'd be mid to late 90s. Yeah, Banjo-Tooie, Nintendo spot. I was just thinking about that the other day, but that's a blast from the past. Holy smokes. Yeah, you had to kind of let those phrases, Banjo and Kazooie have disconnected. Everything was,
That was just the sound then, huh?
Yeah, you had to do that after everything. But yeah.
Well, you've got that in spades, man. I would describe I was describing your voice to somebody as like warm buttered toast.
Warm butter.
Oh, man,
you definitely have that rasp that is so in need right now. Or every audition, slight rasp, but not too much.
Well, man, that's so sweet. That's the second nicest thing anyone's ever said to me, besides the man crush thing.
Dave,
so sweet.
What are some? Can you think of any career changing moments? Something that somebody has shared with you, and you're like, dang, and it really resonated, and you put it in practice, and you're like, wow, this is really effective.
A penny for your thoughts.
thank you for asking that. I'm a broken record on that. My dad, who was, I think, a great voiceover for his time and did a fair amount of national stuff, a lot of regional stuff. My dad years ago, and he was an old school guy, man. He was a guy that, we talked about safeties one time, and I said, yeah, and I gave him a safety. Just went in, it was like 3 takes, and what you gave him a safety? Why'd you do that? What do you mean, Dad? I mean, I don't do that. What, did you record it? Were you recording the first time? Then what do you need it for? Is it good? Okay, let's move on. That was his deal. That was DJ Dan, man. But anyway, so he gave me some advice years ago, and he said, and this sounds so stupid and fundamental probably to so many, but it was revolutionary for me. And he said, man, read your script over and over again. And he said many times you go into a session and they're giving you the copies, you're going in, you feel compelled to just start reading because you think that's the skill set. That's not the skill set. They want your best read, right? Take the time. So from that advice developed what I call my didactic, my definition of voiceover, and I'm going to see if I can remember it. It is master the grammar and the syntax, know why to care and how to mean it, or I think
giving it all lift, life, and voice.
And then it is. Yes, giving it all lift, life, and voice. So that's kind of the thing. And there's a lot, and I can unpack that probably for 30 minutes. You guys ready? No, just kidding. But the bottom line is, the grammar and syntax. I think many times an artist will go, and I know I did, and it was revolutionary for me because I would go and I thought the skill was I can do this fast, and I've got a nice voice, don't I? So you just go in and do it, and man, I just had the worst sessions. But my dad was like, you need to just go in and just get it, just read it smoothly until you just muscle memory that thing, and then you can begin to do the artistry on it. So the artistry doesn't start until you master grammar and syntax, and not just English grammar and syntax, but also voiceover vernacular, voiceover grammar and syntax, which is strange. It's not exactly English. It's sentences are constructed in the way they are because the lawyer said that they had to be, and plus the buyer wants his. He wants his message that should take an hour to say. He wants it in 30. You got to get it in 30 seconds. So anyway, it's a strange thing, but yeah, I would say review. I always say that, and it's probably the most boring thing ever, but it was revolutionary for me. So I just take all the time I need, relatively. Mm-hmm.
Crushing an audition. What's your go-to tip or trick to crush an audition?
Well, I would tell you that, how do you rate that? Because crushing an audition means you book it. And so none of us, I think, book as much as we want to, right?
Of course.
But the ones that I do book, I'm loving them, and sometimes it's just serendipity. It's like like the specs fall into something that's in my toolkit that I just know I've got. You just go in. I just booked an animation thing or a new series. I probably won't be a regular on the series, but it's for one episode of a new series. It's a big series, an animated thing, and it was just, man, it was the two things that were in my wheelhouse, But I would say that same thing. Spend time, research. I'm sure everybody's giving the same advice, but research the company, know a little bit about them. What is try to get into their heads and their sensibilities, and what that stuff is out there now. We didn't used to have that.
YouTube is a gem, isn't it?
Yeah, and listen to what they've had in the past, and do they like that? And they lost the guy for some reason, or the girl for some reason. And yeah, just I think doing some research and then just really applying that same that same idea of becoming the expert on the topic for the moment and love it. Love it as much as you would anything while it's in front of you. And that's just kind of how I'm wired anyway. If you're right in front of me, you're the most important person in the world. The downside of that is when we're away from each other, I may not follow up as well as you would have thought by sitting in front of me. That's a weakness. And likewise, when you audition, forget about it. I mean, I forget. People say, man, I've got friends that say, I was praying about this audition that and I say, I literally don't remember what it was because you got to forget or you'll go crazy. You just literally, and I've trained myself to forget. I cannot tell you what I read this morning. I can't tell you. And that's the truth. I really don't know.
Yeah, no need to dwell on it either.
Perfect, Dave. Well, we're not going to keep you much longer. We're going to get on to the cold read challenge. Dave, I just sent you an email, and I
got it here. I see it. Let me just jump right in. He was a man. She was a woman. Together, they were a man and a woman.
Good try, though.
He didn't have anything to lose. She worked in the lost and found. Together, they would never meet. Is that the one?
No.
Okay.
It should be under the subject line "Cold Read Challenge."
No, that's written by an old friend of mine, Scott Robertson's a variation of it. Anyway,
That's excellent.
I'm not seeing anything.
Okay, so I'm sure I sent it to your David@LAVoiceovers.com.
Okay, let me see here.
And
okay, I just got it.
Yeah, it should say
but
cold
I
read.
wish I would have used that as I reviewed it. I wish I would have been able to, say I haven't got it as I sat and reviewed the script because, I got to follow my advice.
Yeah, well, there's no time to review this. This is the cold read challenge, and you basically just read the direction out loud to us, what I've given you, and then you dive into the VO. But this is a narration. Pretend like you're narrating a documentary.
Cold Read Challenge.
Okay, you got it. So, narration direction, grounded, serious, matter of fact. I love that direction. So here it goes. You've painted up your lips and rolled and curled your hair, your tinted hair. Ruby, are you contemplating going out somewhere? The shadows on the wall tell me the sun is going down. Oh, Ruby, don't take your love to town. My first concert, Kenny Rogers.
No way.
kidding.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. I did that as an homage to your backstory, the Kenny Rogers narration documentary that you did.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. So, man, that's great. That's good stuff, Dave. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thank you guys so much. I love what you're doing. All the best to you guys. God bless you.
Thanks,
Thank you. And if you want to reach out to Dave, you can reach out to him through Dean Panero, or his email is dave@lavoiceovers.com. Dave, thanks so much once again. That's Hoffman with one N.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thanks, Bobby. See you guys.
All right, take care, bud.
The Middle Class VO Podcast is a K2 Media Productions production.
All views and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests. The McVob jingle was written and produced by Kevin.
Co-produced and performed by Chloe Dolandis.
Additional engineering by Zach Zimmett.
Bobby's hair and makeup by Rebecca Adlita.
Kevin's wardrobe by Slippery Pete's Fashion Emporium.
All previous episodes are available for download on Podbean.
For the Middle Class VO Podcast, I'm Tracy Thibodeau.
I'm Lisa Lou Perry.
Thanks for listening.
And don't miss the next episode of
The Middle Class VO Podcast. The Middle Class VO Podcast.